everybody. It's Dave here, Darren over there. We're your two old bloggers. Been commenting publicly about your Minnesota Vikings for over 2 decades apiece. It's a long time, but we're just like you. We're hoping that the Vikings finally reach that golden stage where the confetti's flying and they're kissing the Lombardi. That's what we want. But before that, we have things to talk about. Today, we're going to talk in our first theme about the ghosts of multi-first rounders past. We're going to look at all those drafts that we drafted more than one player in the first round and actually how that turned out. It's pretty surprising, I think. Second one, we're doing the Sam Darnold project, right? It's a top secret deal that only Coach O'Connell and Coach McNeill know about, but they're going to revitalize Darnold's game, or at least they hope to. We'll find out. And then the third one, we're going with You Typed It. There's some statements made by a few of the viewers we want to hit back again and talk about. That'll be all on this Two Old Bloggers now. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. And we're here, and we're about ready to talk about the Sam Darnold project here in a bit. But first, Darren, we're doing this at 5 because you had your umpire school to go to. What do they teach you in umpire school?
Very brief. It was just a tutorial, Dave. Two hours, didn't even go 2 hours. Just looking at positioning, some things that come up, and nothing too basic. I'm helping out with the umpires in our fastball league this year because we don't have very many. I make a bit of beer money doing it. It's also a good way to learn the actual rules of the game, Dave. Ball players think they know the rules, and then when they start umpiring, they realize, I didn't know shit.
That's funny. But that's cool. That's really, really cool. Well, let's get this show started with Theme 1. And let me scroll down. Theme 1, the Vikings Vault.
Third time we're running out this new segment. I'm gonna not be able to call it new in a little while. It'll become a staple. But this is where we look at like significant events that have happened in the Vikings past, or great seasons, or by players, or great players, great or not so great trades. Some of them are great things that the Vikings did, and some of them are not so great. And so this week we just came off of just over a month ago. The Vikings selected, of course, J.J. McCarthy at 10, and then they traded up to get Dallas Turner, linebacker, edge rusher, at 17. And there's a lot of excitement created from that. And about here you got two guys picked very early in the draft, and really looking at the hope is amongst Viking fans and the Vikings front office and coaches is that these guys are going to be cornerstone, long time, multiple Pro Bowl guys that help us get to the Super Bowl, which is where we want to go. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of look at how many times the Vikings have drafted multiple first rounders in the past. The Vikings have been around since 1961, David. They've gone through now 63 drafts during that time. And so you're just showing the graphic, but I was kind of wondering, okay, how many times have the Vikings actually drafted multiple first rounders in their history? And it turns out, as it shows up there, it's been 11 times in 63 drafts. Again, I thought it'd be kind of interesting to look at this because you want to look at I think the assumption is that, hey, if you're picking if you're in the first round, you're picking in the top 30, top 20 of the draft, you should be able to, in theory, you're looking for, you're hoping for, you're expecting that those players that you pick are going to be studs. They're going to be foundational cornerstone players. They're going to, again, play in multiple Pro Bowls, and they're going to be players that are real assets to your team and are going to help you make the playoffs multiple times, win the division multiple times, hopefully get to the Super Bowl and win it. So I thought it'd be interesting to look back at all the times that the Vikings done it, 11 times, and just see how that has turned out for the Vikings. And there you got them. They're all up there, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
If people are able to see, and that graphics, even though you got a lot of names on there, I think, Dave, the graphics are nice and big. Everybody can read them, which is awesome.
The only thing that is a little rough is the titles, and I will point out certain columns when we get to talking about those. So
I think when I looked at this a couple of weeks ago and compiled them, after looking at it, the hope is, again, you're going to get great players. I've got sort of bad news for people, I think, in that you look at the list, to me, it's a little bit depressing and surprising at how those multiple first rounders worked out. The interesting thing, I think, on this, one of the interesting things on this list is that the picking multiple first rounders, actually, Dave, is something that's become more frequent in the past recent history. Really, the last 19 drafts, we have picked multiple first rounders 6 times. In the 44 years prior to that, we'd only done it 5 times. So this has become something that the Vikings, and I don't know about the rest of the NFL, but certainly the Vikings have done that a lot more than they did in the past. Rick Spielman loved doing this, and
yes,
he loved doing that.
But I wonder if, because of the more in the last 20 years or so than in the previous 40, is because of how free agency came about, and you can now start trading, and there's more trading coming on, and it was probably more trading, obviously more trading now than there ever was back when in the early 60s when they started. They went to New York and they had their sheets of paper and they were just knocking things off. I doubt there was, we can trade up to, so many years, because that rule just changed a few years ago. We can trade this or we can trade that. I think that's where things started to pick up, and that's why we see more now.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dave. And also, I think that front offices in the past, it's my belief, were much more conservative than they are now, and so they were probably. And you had some, way back in the day, used to have 20 rounds, like. Yeah. And now you've only got 7. So there may have been a belief back then that you've got so many picks, you got so many darts to throw at the dartboard that you're gonna be able to find good players even if you don't, that quantity over quality type argument instead of the other way around. So, but that's just one little interesting thing I found out. But when you look at our overall, Dave, I said that it's a depressing list. I think the one thing that kind of stuck out for me is that, again, the expectation, every first rounder that gets picked, Vikings fans are always like, yeah, man, we hope this guy is good. We think he's going to be great. All pro are guaranteed. And in this case, in multiple first rounders, the Vikings very rarely have batted 1,000 when they've gotten the multiple first rounders. And I wanted to look at, okay, did they bat 1,000? Was that frequently? Was that almost never? Was that some sort of somewhere in between? And I think that when you look at the list, what you notice is, obviously, fortunately, where we completely whiff on our multiple first rounders, there's not a whole lot of evidence of that. 2005 was the absolute worst. Naturally, you got Troy Stonehands Williamson and Erasmus James, who are big fat zeros for us. That was a horrible draft. The whole draft in 2005 was horrible, not just those guys. But in most cases, though, the Vikings normally hit on one of the two, but not both, or one or and a half, one of the three, and that sort of thing. And, examples would be, you look at 1999, Daunte Culpepper, very good draft pick. Dimitrius Underwood, Not so much.
The only picture I can find of him related to the Vikings was this, when he reported to training camp for that one day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we all know Dimitrius had some severe mental health problems. That's the reason why he didn't. He great talent. When we saw when he did play briefly for Dallas, he was very productive. But again, his mental health issues really.
I think he was one of the first players diagnosed with bipolar.
Yes. And you kind of wonder why the Vikings, maybe that's where the scouting, like where the vetting was of Underwood at that point in time. But Underwood, that's one example. 2013 would be another. Xavier Rhodes, great pick. Sharif Floyd could have been great, but injuries derailed his career. A botched knee surgery. We don't know if the Vikings would have tried to sign him to a second contract, but I think they would have certainly tried. And then Cordell Patterson, the Vikings never really figured out how to use him. It was only his best years, unfortunately, were in other uniforms with New England and with Atlanta recently. But the Vikings never really figured out how to use him and how to best use his talents. And but a missed opportunity there.
Right. But specifically with Cordell Patterson, he did make the Pro Bowl as a Viking, but it wasn't as a wide receiver where we drafted him. It was as a kick returner. And, of course, he's made his career being one of the best kick returners in the NFL. And that is, if you look at who makes Pro Bowls and who doesn't, and I like to say it isn't, when we draft players, I want to think of, hey, he's first rounder. This guy's a potential star, and we want stars on our team. Well, Patterson sort of was a star, just not in the prime position that he was drafted, and that's the deal there. It was a wasted. If you got him in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, right, it would have been fantastic. Mm-hmm. But to give a first rounder for a kick returner, that's like a first rounder for a punter or a kicker. You just don't do that. And that's where I could see where you think
you traded up to get him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you used you punted away your 2nd and 3rd round in that draft to move up to get him in the 1st round. And again, probably the best kickoff returner the NFL has ever seen, but his impact on a game most games was not all that huge compared to if he'd been a wide receiver and he was starting all the time, or eventually if he played running back on a regular basis with the Vikings, which he's done with the Patriots and the Falcons and done very well in that. Those are a couple of examples. 1967, Drew mentioned it was the best. And hey, man, we had 3. You can't complain when you get the best Alan Page, the best defensive tackle to ever play in the NFL. That's a win. And Gene Washington was a solid player, wasn't around for long, but he gave the Vikings a deep threat in the late 60s, which there weren't a whole lot of those. Clint Jones, who was picked before those two, was a complete bust.
Second pick in that draft.
Yeah. So again, the Vikings, that was a pretty good draft, but they didn't hit 100% on that one. Now, the only time that I think they really did bat 1,000 was 1974. And that was when they got Fred McNeill, linebacker out of UCLA, and also got Steve Riley, the tackle, out of USC. And Fred McNeill and Steve Riley, they weren't superstars. They, at least on reputation, they never made a Pro Bowl, but they were long-time, multiple season starters for the Vikings. Freddie on defense, and rest in peace, Fred McNeill, and Steve Riley on the offensive side, where him and Ron Yari were our bookend tackles for a number of years. Again, multiple seasons as starters, key contributors on Vikings teams and some pretty strong Viking teams in the late 70s and the early 80s. So I think that was a year where the Vikings batted 1,000. Maybe they didn't get two Hall of Famers there, but they got 2 guys who they plugged in as starters and were strong contributors to the team. I think overall, Dave, what this, you look at that list and it's like, I don't think there's a whole lot to draw here out of conclusions. I think because you got different front offices who selected these players, different eras, different scouting staffs, different scouting tools that were available to these scouting staffs and how they assess players. But I think it does show that the draft can be a crapshoot, even if you're picking in the top 10, top 20, top 30. And it's very, very difficult to pick, to get it right all the time. That doesn't mean that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah did not get this one right. It doesn't mean that J.J. McCarthy and Dallas Turner are not going to be those multiple year cornerstone players that we have, but it does kind of show just that it's going to be tough. The odds are against the Vikings and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah in doing this. And I think that's part of the criticism that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and the Vikings have got particularly in trading up for Turner and giving as much as they did, because history shows that, at least in the Vikings case, I didn't look at every team who's had multiple first rounders. That would give you a lot more data points to see what's the inevitability of him batting 1,000 or batting 500 or 250 on these sorts of things. But I think that it is risky. I don't think it was the wrong thing to do, but if we are any Viking fan who's like 100% believes that both of these guys are going to turn out to be world beaters is delusional, because there's very little evidence to suggest in our history that that's going to be the case.
Right. Now, if you go by CBS's what they think a first rounder should be, a first rounder should start, and a first rounder has as they say, intangibles to become a Pro Bowler, right? And the easiest way for me to discuss it was we want these guys to be stars. Justin Jefferson's a star, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously got a fantastic career. He's developed into what we want. Christian Darrisaw, same, will be as a tackle. So it's those type of players that we want and expect when they actually get drafted in the first round. Well, the fact is they don't. There was 24 players. Was it 24 players that were drafted in these multiples first round? 12 actually made the Pro Bowl in their careers. That's a decent number. That's 50%. Now, like we said, Patterson as a kick returner, but they made the Pro Bowls. They are stars. Even if you're talking the Pro Bowl don't mean squat nowadays. Well, they do. They identify, if you have enough name recognition to get voted in, you are a star.
Yes.
And I prefer that over, hey, he's a Pro Bowl quality. No, we want stars. We want guys that, we buy their jerseys. We do stuff like that. And those stars generally are your foundational pieces. And so is it 50? If it's at 50%, which one of these two this year is not it? Now, I would suggest, I do not believe, but odds are it's the quarterback that doesn't make it, because that's one of the least. But
that's the one we need to be the superstar.
That's the one that we need to be. You are 100% correct. Now, if we look at Kwesi's drafting so far, right, year one of his regime has been a bust, especially in the first round, right? There's talk that Lewis Cine won't even make it out of camp, right? That the what I'm seeing on Vikings interweb and in Vikings land, the term was they were hoping for a light bulb moment for him, and the light bulb is just burned out. There has not been any sort of light bulb moment for Lewis Cine. He does not get it, and most likely he's not going to get it. And so his time with the Vikings will probably end at the end of August. We'll find out. So that's obviously a bust on Kwesi's part. But last year, he got Jordan Addison. We liked what we saw with Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison was doing great. I'm cool with that. So I'm hoping that both McCarthy and Dallas Turner are hits as well. And we'll just chalk up to, that first draft is Kwesi and the Yips and having Spielman's scout crew and all that sort of thing and throw it in the trash, that it'll be the exception. So, but we're going to find out. I would love both of them to hit because, like you said, there's very few years here where both hit. You had Matt Khalil and Harrison in 2012, Harrison Smith. They both made Pro Bowls. But Matt Khalil made it as a rookie and then went.
Yeah.
So, whereas Harrison Smith, we can argue, needs to be in the Hall of Fame once he retires.
And we have made that argument in the past.
Yes, and we will make it again after this season when he adds a few more numbers to his tally and that he should be there. So, it's rough to see, and some of the worst, Troy Williamson, Erasmus James. God, that was bad. And there's been others. So, but Fred McNeill and Steve Riley, who you pointed out, both had decent careers. They were starters.
Mm-hmm.
They played for McNeill 167 games. For Riley, it was 138. Right? They were primary starters each for 8 seasons. That lives up to that first round billing. Now, I love my camera. That it zooms. I use the deal that it zooms. I don't remember what the command is for not. Away, back, whatever. But what is interesting about this chart, and I'm looking for my little cheat book that tells me what to say on the camera. I can zoom out. Tiny. What is it?
Not yet. That's okay. You'll get it figured out.
Zoom out further. There we go.
Oh, there we go.
And, but it's interesting that all this comes into play and we have it. I mean, it's 50%. Now, I wanted to go over the columns real quick. If you look at AP1, which is the first column where you see red, that's all pros, right? So you've got anybody in that column with green, some sort of green, is a super stud. And that includes Justin Jefferson, Xavier Rhodes, Cordero Patterson is in it, Harrison Smith, and of course the great Alan Page. Those are the only guys that have made all pro out of that. Now, the next column is Pro Bowls. And that's the one we're going to look at. And you can see there are 12 of those that have made the Pro Bowl. Good. That's half of them, 50%. Then you get into primary years started, and where it's in the green, you had at least one or more. You get down to the bottom, great Alan Page was 15 years. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. But it is what it is. Then you get into their value per Pro Football Reference, and then over on the right, the total number of games they actually did play. And that's good for them. And you can see the lowest number is Dimitrius Underwood. But 0 for us. He did go on to play 19 more games, but that was it.
And there's always a great chart, Dave, with all kinds of great info. I guess the criticism about, or the worry about these multiple first rounders, and is it worth it? And you see the Vikings have only hit on batted 500 on these, or maybe a little bit below actually. But I guess the other thing is well, how would that compare to if you have multiple third rounders or multiple second rounders or multiple fifth rounders, or mm-hmm. I think that there is an argument to be made, and Kwesi adofo-mensah.
And I'm sure it's that ski slope.
Yeah.
Right. It drops just as fast as anybody else does.
Yeah. So if your chance of getting, if your best case, or you're normally going to bat 500 with multiple first rounders, but if if your batting average at the 6th round is $150, Mario Mendoza type thing, then you're probably better off accumulating multiple first rounders than multiple 6 rounders,
because you got the better odds. Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Drew, I agree with you. the All-Pro and Pro Bowls in the 70s and 60s carried more weight. I still think All-Pros carry weight because that's such a limited number. You only have, 25 of them are selected, I think, somewhere in there per year for All-Pro Team 1. You got your 22 on each side and then a few extra positions and specialists. That's it. Done. Right? So that's a limited deal. That's why I say what I think is you expect a star to come out of round 1. And reality is you're only going to hit on that about 50% of the time. But if you can hit on both being at least quality starters, you're outstanding. Yes, Drew, the Mendoza line, and we talked about that for years on Good Morning Gallahorn. So that brings us to theme 2. What we named the show after. The Sam Darnold Project.
Not to be confused with the Alan Parsons Project.
No, totally different.
Totally different. Just threw that kind of 70s music trivia in there. Drew like that. But anyway, yeah, the Sam Darnold. We talked about J.J. McCarthy multiple times in our last segment, and going to bring him up here again in that when we picked him in at number 10 overall, that's created a lot of excitement from amongst Viking fans. You, me, everybody on here probably, and that, hey, he is going to be the guy that, hopefully he's the guy that becomes our franchise quarterback, that he's our starter. But what's interesting is that he
becomes a star.
Yes, a star, because that's what we need from that position, and we need a star for a long period of time, something we've not had since the Sir Francis. But it's starting to look like, I guess the reality is that, like, when is he going to take over the number 1 job? And Kevin O'Connell lately has been, I think, pumping the brakes on, Vikings fans and their excitement, and anticipating that people like us are going to be clamoring for J.J. McCarthy to be the starter sooner rather than later. And he's made it very clear from the get-go. They've got a very thorough plan for J.J. McCarthy. He's got a bunch of benchmarks that he's got to make, and he won't be starting until he makes all of those. Checks every box on however many boxes they have on that plan of theirs. He is not going to put J.J. McCarthy in until he checks those boxes and he believes he is ready to be a starter at the NFL level. I believe him 100% in that, and I applaud him on that stance, which means that it's likely that J.J. McCarthy will not be the starter in 2024 at any point. And go ahead, Dave.
Well, there's a possibility of that.
Yes.
It's all up to J.J. McCarthy and where he gets in his progression of checking those boxes.
True. But I think the chances are, because I believe, unlike in other cases, I've seen so many NFL teams, the team starts bad with the journeyman or the bridge quarterback, and then it's 5, 6, 7, 8 games into the season, they go to the rookie just because, they figure it can't get any worse. I don't think that Kevin O'Connell is going to do that, which is why I think that unless McCarthy, and it'd be great if McCarthy does check all those boxes, because that's very, very good for the Vikings' future. I think that he's been able to do all that as a rookie in the short amount of time and beat out a veteran. But I think the chances of that aren't that great at this point. Got nothing to base that on, just on looking in past years and past rookie quarterbacks. But if that is the case, then that means Sam Darnold is your quarterback, your starting quarterback in 2024, at least, for a few games or maybe the entire season, which means that if the Vikings, Sam Darnold is going to have to play very, very well. If the Vikings have any shot of making the playoffs, and of winning their division, and of being somewhat of a contender this year, which most, I think, people outside of Minnesota do not feel that they are going to be, considering the quarterback situation is what it is. You got Sam Darnold or you got a rookie quarterback.
And Vegas shows us they have us finishing 4th in the division.
Yeah. But so if Darnold has to play really well, much better than he's ever played at the NFL level, what's going to be the biggest key to him being the player that the Jets thought they were getting when they drafted a number 3 overall in 2018. I don't think it's physical abilities, Dave, because arm talent, we know he's got it. We know he can make all the throws. As far as being mobile, okay, he's not Lamar Jackson, but he has shown that he can make plays with his legs if he has to. So he's mobile enough. So it's not that. He's got plenty of experience as a starter, Dave. 56 career starts in 6 NFL seasons. So there shouldn't be a whole lot. I'm seeing Goat's comment notwithstanding. There shouldn't be a whole lot right now that is going to surprise Darnold that defenses throw at him in going into his 7th NFL season. And as has been said, since he got signed to Minnesota, he's coming into a great place, a foundation with a lot of weapons to work with in Minnesota. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson eventually, Aaron Jones, Ty Chandler, and you got 2 great tackles, O'Neal and Darisaw, to help keep you clean. We won't get into the interior today. Anthony, I hope you're right that Darnold does surprise some people. But I think that the biggest thing that's really going to be determine how successful is what's between the ears with Sam Darnold right now, because this isn't the case in high school. It wasn't the case at USC, but at the NFL level, he has experienced nothing but failure as a player and pretty much as a member of a team. He got run out of New York with the Jets in 3 seasons, run out of Carolina in 2 seasons there. Now, yes, he made a Super Bowl with San Francisco last year, but that's as Brock Purdy's backup. He had nothing to do with it. So, my concern, I think, with what Darnold's going to have to overcome is that he just hasn't had any on the field's consistent success to go back on when things go bad. He's had a strong game or 2, maybe a strong half, strong quarter, but nothing season long, multiple stacked great games. And so when you're an NFL quarterback with the amount of pressure that you get with fans yelling at you both at home and then away, Tom Brady, Pat Mahomes, those guys, they had multiple positive affirmative things that they did as a team-wise and individually that they could fall back on when they'd have a bad quarter or made a bad throw or had a bad game. Sam Darnold, he doesn't have any of that, right? I wonder, if he has a bad quarter, if he throws a couple of interceptions early in the game, I wonder what's going to go on in his head. He's not going to be able to look back. Oh yeah, but in 2020, I had that 6 games stretch where I had a QBR of 190 and I threw 20 TDs and 0 interceptions. If he has to lead the Vikings on a game-winning drive in the 4th quarter, if he has to make a big throw on 3rd down or 4th down, I got to have a thrower. He's got to be clear-minded, play freely, and get the ball in there and make a big-time throw. What has he got to go back on in his NFL career to say, I can do it? I did it before. Sam Darnold does not have those things. And so I think that is the biggest thing he's going to have to overcome. And he's even recognized that himself, because this week in his presser at OTAs, he got asked, what's been the biggest hurdle for you of being a top draft pick and then coming into the NFL, being a starting quarterback? And he said, bouncing back. He said, it's playing consistently when I've had a bad game, a bad quarter, a bad series. He said, I've got to continue. I got to stack good games one after the other. And that's going to be my goal in 2024, is to keep stacking good games one after another. And it makes a lot of sense. He recognizes it, but again, he's never done it at the NFL level. And I think when adversity hits this season, if he's our starter with the Vikings, what is he going to do what's he get to draw from positively in the past as an NFL starting quarterback that will give him the belief that he can do it? I think that's going to be the biggest thing, that if he can somehow change that, and KOC is going to be working on it and is going to be buttering him up big time. He's already doing it, but I think that's the biggest thing he's got to overcome. And if he can do that, then I think he's got with his physical abilities, which are fine, are pretty good, he's got a chance to be better than we may think he is. Well, Dave, what do you think?
Well, first off, I think the fans are on the right track in the remarks. But first, I wanted to show there was a quote by Ian Rappaport about unbothered, and I'll play Ian in his own words right now.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. We don't always get quarterback competitions. Remember, last summer, we really kind of only had one, and it wasn't even really a competition in Tampa. I mean, it's not always we get this. This is a real one, right? And the fact that Sam Darnold is in there, I've also heard he's looked good. He is going to look good because something he has done his entire career is when it's the spring, really when it's in the preseason, or when he has been, I don't want to say unbothered, but basically unbothered, he has looked excellent. It's really a matter of when he gets in games, is he the same quarterback when it doesn't all go perfectly? So I wouldn't be surprised if Darnold takes the first snap and kind of continues to roll with it. It's just a matter of how long can he roll with it, Judy, with J.J. McCarthy sitting there waiting with all the talent that he has.
And that could be very much the case. But like with Kirk Cousins, I think it's all up to this man. Because what was Kirk Cousins before KOC got here? He was a 500 quarterback. The definition of mediocrity, right? He'd win some, he'd lose some, he'd look great putting up numbers and stats. But he could not transition to being the team leader, to doing what it takes until KOC got here. And then 2 years ago, with KOC telling him to play, and somebody said with a quiet mind, for me, that may be it. But for me, it was to, not vapor lock. I've always talked about Kirk vapor locking when something didn't go well, and to come back at it and to throw into coverage and not wait for when it's open and all those sort of things. 2 years ago, Kirk Cousins over-doubled his fourth quarter comebacks, over-doubled his game-winning drives. Now, yes, there's a little bit of luck into that because the football is not round and it bounces funny. And there's luck involved in football. But KOC did get Kirk Cousins playing better than he had in his previous years, right? And I'm talking for winning football, not just throwing up. He threw for 5,000 yards and 35 touchdowns, but we only won half the game. No, I'm talking about being able to take a team in the fourth quarter that's down, having the confidence in the huevos suddenly found to drive them down the field and score and win the game. That, I believe, was from KOC. If KOC can do that with Sam Darnold, because I think it's much the same problems, right? Sam Darnold, when he has a bad game, bad throws, bad series, he doesn't know how to bounce back. I think if KOC can quiet his mind, like was said in the remarks, that he can become a quality quarterback. And if he becomes a quality quarterback and takes us to the promised land, all the great. Doesn't mean he's going to be with us next year, but I don't think he's going to do that. But I think he's going to win quite a few games, while J.J. McCarthy is also pet project of Kevin O'Connell. And they work on changing his footwork and getting him ready and checking all those boxes. I think this is the biggest challenge for our coach right now. And if he can do that, if he can turn Sam Darnold into a quality quarterback, Sam Darnold will go on next year and make probably starter money somewhere, because we're not going to pay him starter money. We got a rookie quarterback. We're going with the rookie quarterback. But that's the key to all of this. And I think the key to Sam Darnold is that man right there. And, of course, Josh McNeill is going to play into that as well. So if he can quiet his mind, if he can get him to get through that, Sam Darnold can be a success. That's the way I see this project working. Otherwise, we're going to see JJ, hopefully JJ will be ready when we see JJ.
Yes.
And it's not, too soon because of that. But that is the Sam Darnold project. and it's all part of KOC's. He's got a twofer this year. Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy.
Going to be interesting, but when isn't it?
True. All right. Now, that brings us to theme 3. Anthony, I agree with you. If he can quiet his mind, we'll all be smiling. And I like that. And for this one, we've got You Typed It.
Looks like Anthony Tollinson.
It sure does.
Yeah, this is a bit of a, we did it a month and a half ago or something, where we're looking at it's a way of us to look back and highlight and focus on some of the great comments and takes that our viewers, people like you, throw on or put up on the show every week. And so a new segment, and this is the second time we've done it, and there was about 3 comments. There was more, but I had to keep it short. But there were 3 comments that I wanted to circle back on from last week. That
2
caught
of them, we've got viewers watching in the.
That's right.
In the chat.
First one is last week we went into the schedule of the Vikings schedule. Just did a bit of a rundown on that, and focused on the first 7 games, how tough those first 7 games are for the Vikings. And I said that it wouldn't be hard to envision looking at those first 7 games with the Vikings quarterback situation being what it is. We're not sure what kind of type of play we're going to get from Darnold or McCarthy, but that it wouldn't be hard to envision the Vikings going 1-6, shudder the thought, or 2-5, considering that slate of games looks pretty tough for the Vikings. But our buddy Drew Bunting, who I think is still here,
yeah, Drew's there.
He did caution me to not underestimate the Vikings so much, and his comment was, there it is. The Vikings have, in my opinion, a better defense out of those 7 teams, minus San Francisco as well. So let's factor that into the equation. And that's a very good point, because we talked about it last week as well, the defense. Brian Flores, the Vikings added a bunch of guys to their defense in free agency and through the draft. Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Blake Cashman, Shaq Griffin at corner. And then they drafted Dallas Turner, and they also drafted Kyrie Jackson in the 4th round, cornerback. So that's a whole lot of new tools, shiny new toys that Brian Flores has to work with. And again, considering what he did with the defense last year with what he has to work with, I think that the Vikings defense right now on paper is much more talented than it was at this time last year. So
I concur.
More talent with Brian Flores doing what he does should lead to a better defense that last year was pretty solid overall, except for, 3 or 4 games where they didn't play so well against, but that happens. So I think that, that's a fair point. But looking at I guess I'm going to disagree slightly with Drew in a bit, in that looking at those 7 teams, some of those defenses, the Texans, they had a pretty strong defense last year. Now they lost Grenard and they lost Cashman. They also added Danielle Hunter.
Yeah.
You could say they lost Griffin too, but they'd already got rid of him before the season was over. But still, that defense last year under DeMeco Ryans played pretty well. It wasn't just CJ Stroud and the offense that was the reason that they got to the playoffs. The defense played a big role in that too. And I think that they're still going to be strong. So, that's one thing. You look at the Lions. Okay, defense wasn't great last year, but they did add a lot of young talent, and they've added some more this year. And particularly their weakness last year was at corner. Well, they drafted Terrion Arnold. They drafted Rakestraw from Missouri, and they signed Carlton Davis III from Tampa Bay, who has always been a pretty good cornerback. And they added DJ Reader along defensive line too. They also picked up Davenport. Not sure what they're thinking there, but anyway.
Well, they're hoping he'll go on the opposite side and that he'll stay healthy and
enjoy that one game he plays for you, line. but I think that their defense is going to be again, on paper, their defense looks much improved compared to last year. I think they're going to take a step up. And then the Jets, another team we play, I think in week 2 or whenever we play them in Europe. No, it isn't week 2, but when we play them in Europe, again, last year, their defense, they were really solid last year. Yes. Very, very good. The problem was their offense was terrible, put them in all kinds of bad situations. So that, I think that it was miraculous that they only averaged giving up 20 points a game last year. So I think, and their defense is still pretty young. They're going to be tough as a defense too. So is the Vikings defense so much better than particularly those 3 teams that I mentioned, who are 3 of the 7 teams we play first? Our defense going to be so much better that it tips the game in our favor, that much? I don't know. I hope that happens, but I think sitting here in May, I can't really say that with a whole lot of confidence.
I think they will. That's why I made this slide.
Dave, nothing would please me more if you were right.
I think Brian Flores and what the magic he worked with, what little talent was there last year, and the fact that we added more talent this year, I think, and, of course, we lost some games at the end, but that was because people were getting hurt, and some teams were starting to figure things out just a bit. I bet he's back. He's been in his lab. He's been stirring his stew pot of secret stuff, and he's going to come out all nice and fresh, and these fresh faces are going to make a huge difference this season and keep us in it. Whether we have Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy QBing us, I think this will do it. And yes, Drew, and you get on the offensive side, and J.J. Jettas, Jefferson can tilt the game by himself as long as he gets the ball. That's 100% true. And I think there's enough talent on the offensive side to keep us close no matter what. And if the defense improves, we're going to be close. Now, do we have tough schedule at the beginning of the year? Yes, we do. We're playing a lot of good teams. Most of them were in the playoffs last year. But I think it's going to be closer than what people give us credit for and what Vegas gives us credit for on those games. So we'll find out. Well, that was the first. You typed it. Now we're getting to the second one. Can the production return?
Yeah. Last week we talked about Robert Tonyan and how I think that potentially he could be a much more significant free agent signing than we think, considering when the Vikings got him, which was just last week. And looking back at his past, particularly when you look at his past production with that team from Wisconsin. Now, Sarah, who logged on late, she cautioned me against being too optimistic because, I pointed out that Tonyan had caught 53 passes for well over 500 yards and 11 touchdown catches in 2020. And so she said, yeah, well, 2020 was 4 years ago. I don't know. So she's on the fence. It appears to be with Robert Tonyan, and I get it. 4 years, 2020, 4 years. That's like, a dog, every year they live is like 7 human years. Well, 4 years, 4 years in the NFL is something similar. Or like it's a long
like a
time.
Decade. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A long time. And so, looking at 2020, and that was Robert Tonyan's best season as a pro pass catching wise. It's right to be skeptical whether he can come anywhere close to reproducing that as a Viking. But in 2022, which was only 2 years ago, he did catch not nearly as many touchdown passes, only 2 that year, but he did his catches and his yardage were pretty similar to 2020. So I think that's a bit closer. Last year, he just didn't get any opportunity with the Chicago Bears at all. Not sure what was going on there. But I guess my point here is that Tonyan, with his pass production, he clearly has more of a track record of being not just a serviceable and potentially dangerous pass receiving option than Johnny Munt does, than Josh Oliver does, than Nick Muse have. So I think that, again, this signing is certainly well worth taking a shot at. And I do think that particularly when we don't know how long TJ Hawkinson is going to be out. But as long as he is out, I think that it eventually, and it might be sooner rather than later, that it's going to be Robert Tonyan is going to be the guy who's going to be the main guy that JJ McCarthy or Sam Darnold throw to at the tight end position than anybody else until TJ Hawkinson gets in there. And so remains to be seen, but I feel pretty good about adding Tonyan and what he can bring to the table receiving wise for the Vikings, as long as he's given a significant role and gets significant snaps at that position.
I hope you're right, because I sort of agree with Sarah. I don't think it's going to happen, and we're going to rely on Oliver and Munt and Muse, and it's because he's beyond his deal. He's an older player. So I think he's going to be the oldest tight end in the group, and it doesn't bode well. If it does, great, absolutely fantastic. But we talked earlier this week on Thursday when I did the NFC North show, because he played for the Bears last year.
Yes,
and the Bears correspondent Pay was all frustrated because he'd get balls thrown to him and he'd just drop them. And that's inexcusable. I mean, as a tight end and a wide receiver, your primary job, now tight ends have two, blocking, but the secondary part of that is catching footballs. That's what you're supposed to do, is catch footballs. And if you can't catch footballs, it means you're not going to be on the field long, because coaches will yank you in a heartbeat. So we'll see what happens. Now, I think he's a half-decent blocker, whereas Hawkinson is primarily a pass catcher. Hawkinson has worked on his run blocking, but it's not. But I think everybody else is good at run blocking, and I think our focus on the run this season to better complement the pass is going to be improved because of it. But we'll find out.
Yep.
And this brings us to our last quote from Selling McCarthyism, who isn't on today to argue with us. I don't know why.
Yeah, no, we talked a bit about eventually last week we got into, there's a bit of debate, mostly in the comments section, about the Vikings salary cap situation and roster building situation. And Selling McCarthyism had a real hot take where, again, he advocated, or he thinks that we need to trade either O'Neill or Hawkinson, possibly even, or potentially Justin Jefferson, because we just can't afford them all. Sarah did not agree with this at all. And she won't this week either. She's still honest. But you see the comment up there, and he goes, paying, in his rationale was, paying five guys top end contracts isn't the way to build a sustainable contender. We only have 3 draft picks next year. Actually, we have 4, taking in the third round compensatory pick that
and we may have a 5th, but yes.
Yeah. And we have a whole set of trenches and secondary to rebuild. Well, certainly in the trenches, particularly on the defensive line and the interior, there's issues there for sure. Secondary, we'll see. We've added a bunch of new talent here the past couple of years. Maybe that'll pay off. But I did want to get at this because I don't feel that the Vikings salary cap situation in 2025 is going to be as dire as Selling McCarthyism thinks. There's a few reasons for that. Yes. Clearly Justin Jefferson, when he gets his extension signed here in the next few weeks, in the next couple of months, hopefully, it's going to be expensive. It's going to eat into our cap space, but I think that it's going to be structured so that in 2024 and 2025, it's not going to be as expensive as it will be in the subsequent years. So that's going to get built into it. Darisaw won't get extended until 2025. And his contract, I think, will be structured similarly to Justin Jefferson's, and that it'll be 2025 and 2026, where it'll be a little bit cheaper. And then beyond that, it gets more expensive. The other thing is Brian O'Neill. His salary cap is going to be $26 million next year, which is pretty large. On the other hand, the salary cap keeps on going up, and up. And also, he's a player at his age. He's still not old, but he's, where the Vikings, I think, would look at that number and try to work out a restructuring for him, adding in some void years, which has its pluses and minuses, but looking at ways to ease his cap hit in 2025, maybe 2026, so that they have room to accommodate Justin Jefferson and Darrisaw down the line and other players. And then there's players on our roster right now who are eating up salary cap space who might not be on the team next year. Harrison Phillips this year has an over $8 million salary cap hit. He's a free agent at the end of the year. Will the Vikings bring him back? I don't know if they will. He's a solid player, but not a superstar. Byron Murphy is a guy where his salary cap's not that large, but depending on the type of year he has this year, the Vikings, if they cut him post June the 1st next year, he'd only be 1.4 million salary cap hit. So there's ways with veterans that you either let go through free agency or you cut that you can create cap space. And then there's a whole chunk of dead cap space, Dave. It's quite scary. That's going to come off the books as well. Like Kirk Cousins is costing us $28.5 million in dead cap space right now, and he's not even playing for us. Danielle Hunter, 14.9 in dead cap space, not playing for us. Even Marcus Davenport, he's costing us $6.8 million in dead cap space this year. So I think this is a long way of saying there's a number of ways that I think the Vikings can afford to keep Justin Jefferson and Hawkinson and Darrisaw and O'Neill based on their cap space. They're going to have they're set to have quite a bit of cap space in 2025 anyway. Some of that's going to get eaten up by Jefferson and other free agents they sign, but they've got a great cap space situation going into 2025. There's things that they can do with restructures, with extensions, with releasing vets, and also, again, with the dead cap space that's going to come off of the team's books, that I think it's going to allow them to keep the studs and also build a contending, well-rounded roster with lots of depth so that we can contend for division titles, can contend for NFC championships, can contend for Super Bowls in 2025 and beyond, as long as we get the quarterback situation right.
Yep. And without doubt, that's the key to this. I have this graph up here. This is the base graph for this section. It is the 2025 cap space per over the cap, OTC. It shows us fifth in the league with the most at almost 69 million available cap. And if you look at the middle column, the small column with the number, it says we have 54 people are currently under contract for 2025. That's a ton of room. And considering that if Jefferson gets signed, his cap hit next year will probably be lower and we'll have more space. And Darrisaw will be the year after in 2026. And the wonderful deal for 2025, I have in green, we owe $0 in dead cap. None, zero, nada. Unlike this year, which was what, 57 million in dead cap?
Yes.
We're not paying that. The biggest dead cap next year for somebody is the Broncos. And go figure. That's what happens. So the whole point is we have money to pay these 5 individuals. Why do we have money to pay for these 5 individuals? Is because we're not paying 20% for a quarterback. Our quarterback... Not yet. Not yet. Our quarterback is on a rookie pay scale. Now, Darnold obviously is making $10 million, but that's already figured in. He's not going to be there next year, so that doesn't count. On a rookie pay scale, he won't get paid until it's actually 4, he gets a big money, and then 5 if we pick up his 5th-year extension. But it still makes it happy. In 5 years, O'Neill should be probably retired. Or getting close to it, right? Or
you'd be at the stage where you're moving on from him.
Right. And it's so all these are going to fit in that, hey, I got a rookie quarterback window and can fit those. Now, once that rookie quarterback, if he succeeds, which we hope JJ does, just like Pat Mahomes did at Kansas City, then you got to pay the quarterback a lot of money. Then the sacrifices start. But until then, we do have the money to pay for these star players. Now, everybody goes, Dave, tackles aren't stars. Well, if you follow the old line, tackles can be stars. And that's a good thing because it's going to keep the team strong and healthy for the next 4 to 5 years. I'm all for it. By all means, pay him. Even if JJ's breaking the bank, we're figuring he's going to make about $35 million per year. That still fits. It still fits easily, and we still pay other players. It's not a big deal. So that's what would be my answer to selling McCarthyism, that we have the room, we can do this. It's not hurting us at all. It's actually making us better. And during that time period, be it this year with what we've got, and then next, especially targeting next year, both in the draft and free agency, we can hit those interior O-line if we need it, interior defensive line, because we probably will, and we want the big guys in the middle that can actually push and stuff like that. We can answer those questions, and we still have room. That's what Kwesi clearing all the books of what Spielman and Zimmer did is the best thing for us.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Sarah likes your take, Dave. She says you get it.
Well, it's to me, it's logical, and that's what we do. I will ride with this group. Let's go. Give credit to Purple Daily for the above statement. Hey, if Phil Mackey or whoever said that did, good for him. Absolutely. I'm going to ride with him too. We're Vikings fans. That's what we do. Not what we do at all. Norsefius says he's confused, not concussed. What is that? I'm not quite sure, Norsefius, but yes. Dave L. says, blessing to all the vets that gave their life for the country. Blessings to all the vets. Have a good one. Yes, this is Memorial Day weekend. And there it is to remember those that have fallen in the line of duty to their country. That is what this holiday is for. It's not those for us that survived. However, the difference between, say, me, a vet that did combat and everything else, and those that left us is they had a bullet or a bomb with their name on it. I lucked out. I didn't have that. I've had some close to me, but I didn't have that. But I've lost some friends, and I will remember them tomorrow and raise a beer, and we'll have a good time, probably burn some burgers and some dogs and have a real good time. But that's what this weekend's for. And those guys that have gone, they'd want you to be happy and having a good time burning burgers, going out to the lake, fishing and boating and having a great time, going to a Wolves game if you get the tickets. You know, things like that. That's what they want. They want you to be free. That's what they fought for. So, yes, we want to remember them. They gave their all, and for that we are grateful. Any last words there, Darren?
Hard to top that, Dave, what you just said. I'd forgotten it was Memorial Day down south of the border. So happy Memorial Day to everybody. And yeah, let's remember people who gave as they say, the ultimate sacrifice in line of duty. But we didn't get into OTAs in this episode. They did happen last week, but a little bit tough because yeah, that's true. But the media I think only got to see the Tuesday, the Tuesday OTA. I think I did listen to. I don't want to drone on here, but I do a couple of things. As I was listening to Luke Braun, he was talking to Alec Lewis from The Athletic, and he was asking Alec Lewis about it, and Lewis mentioned that surprise, Jalen Naylor flashing again. In OTAs. So Naylor's always been an interesting guy. I'm hoping that he grabs the number 3 wide receiver position. His problem is always staying healthy. It was a problem in college. It's been a problem in the pros so far, but I'm hoping to hear more positive talk about Naylor because I don't trust Brandon Powell as being our number 3 guy, or Trent Sherfield if those are the options. So that was interesting. He also said that Caleb Evans was starting on the corner opposite of Shaq Griffin with Murphy inside. Can't take too much out of that because who knows what Brian Flores is going to do. But that disappoints me a little because I really think Mekhi Blackman should be starting over Caleb Evans, but that's just me. The other thing that I heard was Will Ragatz brought it up was that Lewis Cine got beaten coverage twice that he saw and dropped an interception, which isn't a big deal, I think, because if Harrison Smith does that, well, it's Harrison Smith. But when you're Lewis Cine and you do that, it's a little bit different.
It gets to that light bulb thing.
Yeah.
But
so going to be charting. That's one of the things I'm going to be charting is, again, hearing what Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth are doing at OTAs and training camp and then preseason too, because again, I think they got big targets on their backs as far as roster. Are they worth a roster spot? And early OTAs, but Lewis Cine not shining so far.
Surprise.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
And
with that, I want to thank everybody that joined us today. You've been great. Sarah, great statement. Drew, another great statement by you as well that we took and we played off of. I want everybody to be safe this weekend, no matter what. Have a great time, celebrate, and be safe. What do we say, Darren?
We say SKOL Vikings, baby.
SKOL Vikings.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcast as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!